Thank you again for joining us for the Voluntary Benefit Shop's bi-weekly broker webinar series. My name is Mike Walker. I'm the president of the Voluntary Benefit Shop. We host these events every 2 weeks to try to bring you news and solutions and updates on what's going on in the marketplace in a voluntary benefit space. So before I turn it over to today's guest speakers, and today we have Kathleen O'Rourke and Eric Miner from Allstate with us today, talk about a very specific topic. But before we turn it over to them, I do want to say that, most of you are probably familiar with the Voluntary Benefit Shop, but if you're not, we work with, brokers all over the country and really help them bring the best in voluntary benefits, products, carriers, services, ideas to their clients. So if you have voluntary benefits needs for your clients, voluntary benefits questions, that type of thing, feel free to reach out to us, whether you already do business with us or you're just looking for an outlet to help you answer your questions or you'd like to do business with us. Reach out to us. You have on the screen right now, you have my email, my phone number, and our website. But we're here to help. Even though, like I said, if it's just to get started, if I've never talked to you before and you just have a general question, feel free to reach out. I think we do have a pretty good, overall expertise level when it comes to all things voluntary. So with that said, I'm going to, introduce today's topic and speakers. Today we do have, as I said, we have Kathleen O'Rourke and Eric Miner from Allstate with us today, and they're going to talk about essentially the proposed state long-term care tax in Washington that was going through Washington State last year. This was a tremendous opportunity, is one word for it. It did present a tremendous opportunity to firms like ours and probably brokerages like yours to really capitalize on these opportunities. We did a pretty good job as an organization last year of capitalizing on some of these opportunities in Washington State, but also I think the way it was rolled out in Washington State did cause a lot of questions and confusion and things of that nature. The good news is, or maybe the good news is there are about 13 to 15 other states that are considering rolling out the same type of long-term care tax in their states. And so we certainly know as an organization, we want to be well prepared for those other states to help assist companies and brokers provide a solution to their employees. And I'm sure that you do as well. So we look at this today as just kind of the beginning part of that process or a continuation of that process for you to help educate you on what could be coming down the pike in the rest of these states and kind of what the status is in Washington State right now. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the Allstate team. And again, we have Katie O'Rourke and Eric Miner from Allstate. So with that said, take it away, Eric and Katie.
Wonderful. Well, first and foremost, thank you very much to Mike and the Voluntary Benefit Shop for having us today. As Mike mentioned, my name is Katie O'Rourke. I'm here with Eric Miner. I'm a voluntary benefits, the VP of National Accounts for the Northeast. I'm very excited to be here today to talk about Washington State and the opportunity that it presented last year to all of us and the opportunity that we see coming over the horizon with the rest of the states who are potentially rolling this opportunity out and the I would say, level of awareness that has increased in the marketplace around voluntary benefits and specifically life with long-term care because of Washington and the states coming in the future. So first and foremost, just to give you an idea of how this is going to be structured, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened in Washington, about what Washington was attempting to accomplish and how it really helped us to drive business in Washington State. We're going to talk a little bit about our benefits and how they are a solution for your clients. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we see moving forward. So it's kind of our plan. We look forward to going through it with you and look forward to getting your feedback. So thank you very much. So Washington Cares was really rolled out to address the challenges around long-term care. I think everyone recognizes that long-term care presents a very real burden for Americans. 7 out of 10 people will need long-term care during their lifetime. And realistically, most people do not have the savings to address the costs associated with long-term care. It was also addressed to help alleviate some of the expense associated with long-term care that is put on the Medicaid system. So Washington Cares was really designed to help address those two concerns. It was designed to be affordable, and it was designed to be paid for by a wage tax. You can see some of the information here, and this actually all just comes directly from the Washington Cares website. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of what Washington is attempting to accomplish with the Washington Cares Act. So just to give you an idea of what the bill is designed to do, and the very real need that the bill is designed to address. So as mentioned, Washington Cares is the nation's first taxpayer-funded long-term care insurance program. It is truly groundbreaking. It's funded by a payroll tax of 0.58% on all W-2 employees in the state. And as mentioned, designed to reduce Medicaid pressure and also to provide assistance to those who are unprepared for long-term care expense. And candidly, that is, I would argue, probably the vast majority of Americans. It was designed to begin on January 1st, but I believe that's already been pushed back given some challenges around the implementation of the plan. And benefits were scheduled to start as of January 2025. So the plan is funded via tax. Benefits start as of January 2025. But the interesting thing about the Washington Cares plan is that employees had the option of opting out of the plan if they chose to. And a lot of employees did elect to opt out of the plan. And that is where private insurance came into play and where private insurance became pretty valuable to employees. And just to give you a sense of who might decide to opt out of the Washington Cares plan. So the Washington Cares plan, as mentioned, was funded by a payroll tax. That payroll tax was not capped by earnings. So for someone who is highly compensated, a lot of times the payroll tax paid would really end up not necessarily matching the amount of benefit received. The Washington Cares plan would pay $100 of benefit for per day for 1 year, so $36,000 in benefit. Now that is inflation adjusted, but realistically, depending on how much you are compensated and depending on how long you're going to be working, that may not necessarily that may not make sense financially for you. So depending on your income, a lot of folks made the decision to opt out of the plan if they were highly compensated. The other caveat with one of the other caveats with the Washington Cares plan is that you could not take benefits with you if you left the state of Washington or if you're planning on leaving the state of Washington. So if employees were not necessarily tied to Washington and might be planning on retiring somewhere else, the Washington Cares fund may not be the right solution for them. That is also the case for employees planning on retiring before 2025, or employees who wanted more control over their long-term care plans. $36,000 may not necessarily be enough to cover your long-term care expenses. Realistically, it's only a year of benefits. I would argue that a lot of folks are going to require long-term care coverage for longer than a year. So if you wanted to be able to customize the coverage that you received, you may have elected to elect a private plan because that gave you more options and more flexibility as well. So we did have a lot of people interested in looking at a private option because it gave them more control, more financial flexibility, and once again, just may have made more sense for them from a financial perspective.
Hey, Katie, one thing I want to add that I'm not sure everybody understands, but you alluded to it, was that, and I know you're going to cover it here, was that in order for someone to opt out, all they had to do was secure a private long-term care plan. Okay, and it looks like you're going to cover that on this slide, but that was basically the way that they could opt out. So with that said, I'll let you run with this slide.
Yes, and that is the key. So basically, the way that the Washington Cares plan was structured was if an employee had private coverage and that private coverage needed to be in place by 11/1 of 2021, they could opt out of the public option. And the way that the private coverage was structured, or excuse me, the way that the state defined private coverage, it included life with a long-term care rider, which was great because that gave the employees the option to elect group coverage through Allstate benefits and a few of our competitors. So this actually really opened up the market to Allstate benefits to write quite a bit of coverage in Washington state and gave employees the option to elect coverage that was both cost-effective, guaranteed issue, and very easy to enroll in, which to me was the key. We really had the ability to provide a solution to employees that was financially advantageous to them and very easy to elect. Long-term care coverage can sometimes be very challenging to get, especially if you may have underlying health conditions. And this really solved that problem and allowed us to implement coverage quickly for our employer partners, given the challenges around meeting that 11/1 mandate deadline. So just to give you an example, as mentioned, the Washington CARES Act pays $100 a day, so $36,500 a year. As of right now, that is inflation adjusted. We were able to provide private coverage with annual limits of, with limits of GI limits of 50,000, 75,000, and sometimes higher, depending on the demographics, industries, et cetera, which does provide a greater benefit for employees if they choose to elect that coverage. If they chose to elect that coverage, they would qualify for the opt-out. And to qualify for the opt-out, it was pretty interesting. You had to purchase long-term care coverage through a private carrier. Allstate Benefits counted as a private carrier. There was no minimum coverage required, though most people were recommending that employees cover at least $36,500 to meet that state limit. You had to be at least 18 years or older, and you have to submit an exemption to the state. Once you have that exemption, it would carry over from employer to employer, though you do have to continue submitting that exemption as you change employers. And if you do that, you would be eligible to not participate in that state tax requirement. So pretty unique situation. It was a one-time situation. So you had to have this coverage by 11/1/2021. And if you did not have coverage by 11/1/2021, you are going to be enrolled in this tax, and it is going to basically be effective, at least to our knowledge, from here on out. So unless something changes, you're kind of enrolled in this plan. So again, kind of a unique situation, definitely caused some confusion in the industry, I would say, but was a huge opportunity for both brokers and insurance carriers to really provide a solution that was very valuable to employers and employees in the state of Washington. Allstate Benefits alone wrote 70,000 life with long-term care policies in Washington in 2021. I can tell you that was very back-end loaded. Most of that business came in call it the third quarter. And it was a very interesting situation because all of those folks were really attempting to get this coverage in before 11/1, but we made it work and it was very successful. So we've talked a lot about looking back at what Washington State was, how this worked, why it was important. But I think really the question is, why does this matter now? We're sitting in 2022. Obviously, Washington State has come and gone to some extent. You had to have that coverage by 11/1. So why does this matter for the future? I think it matters for two key reasons. The first reason is this really provided a lot of visibility toward the importance of long-term care, the need for long-term care, and the value of a life with long-term care product. So that is the first thing. Even in states that are not even thinking about this type of mandate, the importance of long-term care insurance has really come to the fore. And the value of a life with long-term care vehicle to provide long-term care insurance has really come to the fore. But then the second reason why this is especially important is that there are a number of states who are considering similar legislation. So if you take a look at the map on the screen, obviously Washington's in green because they've already moved forward. These are the additional states looking at this legislation, with California probably being the next to move forward. So this is not something that's going to stay in the state of Washington. This is something that's going to be happening across the country. And our hope is that as it happens across the country, it continues to drive employer groups to look at life with long-term care as a viable and valuable solution for their employee population. I can tell you that I have groups that are situs in states that are not currently in orange or purple that are offering life with long-term care because they have populations in those states and they want to be ready for when these states move forward. I think there's a little bit of I think people have learned a lesson from Washington with just the kind of fire drill associated with how quickly this all needed to happen. So there is an impulse to have coverage in place so that way when the next state goes live, we're ready to go and we don't have to worry about building this out from scratch, and we can kind of just flip the switch, offer a re-enrollment, offer new guarantee issue coverage instead of having to do it all over again. So just something to be aware of, something to talk about with your employer groups, but definitely I think the next big thing, or I should say the continuing big thing, because it was definitely our number one product in 2021, and I expect that to continue and to build in 2022. So how can we help? We've talked a lot about how this has worked and what the value is around it, but let's get a little bit into the nitty gritty. So Allstate offers two different permanent life options. We have both whole life and universal life. And I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but I did just want to mention that we do offer both plans. The whole life and the universal life both met their requirements in the state of Washington for the Life with Long-Term Care mandate. And they both can be wonderful solutions. You know, whole life, I would say, is more stable. It tends to be more tech friendly. Universal life is a little bit more flexible. So just a handful of differentiations here for you. One thing to just mention on the whole life, it's available in both tobacco and unitobacco rates. So if that's something that your client is interested in and would prefer not to deal with tobacco status, that's something we can provide. It's also available in age-banded rates, which tends to be popular if you have a situation where you're looking at tech coverage or something like, or tech platforms or something like that. So just something to be aware of there. Really, at the end of the day, I would say the key when it comes to universal life versus whole life, and I apologize, I should have turned these little things off, is that universal life is really flexible. Whole life is guaranteed. So what that means at the end of the day is universal life really gives you the opportunity to customize as you move through your life cycle. You have to pay a minimum premium, but you can customize that, increase it, decrease it as you go through your life cycle, as your needs change. Whole life is guaranteed. So your premiums, benefits, cash value, et cetera, are guaranteed, and you know what they look like from the front. So personally, I believe whole life is a little bit of a better vehicle for long-term care because you have those guarantees up front. You don't have to worry about things like how the market's going to perform. You don't have to look at illustrations, et cetera. But we do have both, and depending on the needs of your client, we can really provide either option for you. So either the whole life or the universal life has the ability to offer our long-term care rider. There are a handful of states where we don't have long-term care rider approved, but it is approved in most states at this point. The long-term care rider pays a 4% benefit for up to 25 months. So just to use, an example, if you have a $100,000 benefit, that's going to pay you $4,000 for up to 25 months. We also have the ability to offer extension, which basically gives you up to 50 months of benefit. So again, $100,000 benefit, it's going to pay $4,000 for up to 50 months instead of $4,000 for up to 25. And we have the ability to offer restoration. What restoration does is allows you to access both the death benefit and that long-term care benefit. So you have the ability to take both. You can have the restoration of the death benefit, and then you can also elect long-term care. We also have the ability to offer a chronic illness rider in those states where the long-term care rider is not available. Just mentioning that because that's another great way to get some of that death benefit in the hands of employees if necessary. But just keep in mind that chronic illness rider does not typically satisfy that long-term care requirement at the state level. At least it didn't in Washington. Obviously, we can't know how other state legislatures are going to structure that, but that is our expectation. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just wanted to touch on how the death benefit, the accelerated death benefit for long-term care actually works on the policy. And the reason I put this in here is because anyone who's familiar with long-term care insurance, this should feel fairly similar. We really designed our accelerated death benefit for long-term care to really feel similar to a true long-term care benefit in terms of the triggers used. So just want to mention, if you are going to trigger the long-term care benefit, it's going to have a 90-day elimination period. You have to be chronically ill. You have to satisfy the loss of 2 ADLs, or you have to be cognitively impaired. And then the one thing that I do want to mention is we do allow you to collect the full long-term care benefit if you are receiving care at home or in a facility. And that's really important. More and more people, especially nowadays, want to receive care at home. And with the long-term care rider on our whole life or universal life policy, you can do that. So it's a great feature to have and a really important thing to be aware of as well. So now I'm going to hand it over to Mike to talk about some real life examples of how this worked for us and how it worked for our team.
Thanks, Katie. Guys, we're just going to look at a couple of quick, case studies here. I do want to say that really the opportunity with this was, and what we found was that organizations were really just looking for guidance. Like, how do I deal with this? How do I offer my employees something that's going to satisfy the mandate? But more importantly, how do I educate my employees on what all of this means, right? So it wasn't just about offering a product. It was about having an education mechanism that allowed employees to understand it, ask questions, sort through the information, and then make a decision that was best for them. And so we did a number of cases. Allstate was a great partner with us. We chose Allstate really for all of the cases we did for this, except with the exception of one. And Allstate was a great partner for us with this in this particular project. So this first client I'm going to tell you about is a trucking company. Okay, so blue collar. They're based in Washington State. Many of their employees throughout the country were subject to this because they were considered employees based out of Washington State, even if they lived other places. And so we brought in the Allstate Whole Life program. We actually got a really high level of guaranteed issue here. We got $100,000 worth of guaranteed issue. So as Katie said, sometimes it's higher than that 50 or 75,000. We got the 100,000 in guaranteed issue. And then we provided education through our benefit education call center. So we did a series of webinars. We had our call center open. There was an email and text campaign that went out to employees and essentially gave them a link to a portal that gave them information. So Katie, I don't know if you're able to click on that link there, possibly, and see if that pulls up the portal. So they clicked the link, and it brought them to a program like this. They had scenarios where they could get information regarding the Washington Cares, et cetera, and that type of thing. They could schedule their appointment with their counselor. They could get information on the life of long-term care. Katie, you can go back to the other, yeah, there you go. So, and then call center hours for us were open between the hours of 9 a.m. Eastern time to midnight Eastern time, because again, these are employees on the West Coast, and so we were able to accommodate that up until 9 p.m. on the West Coast. The real thing that this group needed, they just needed a lot of education. Like, you got to think, they were a lot of drivers, they're driving all over the place, they're super busy with their jobs and with their life. They just needed education on how is this going to impact me and how is it going to work, et cetera. And so what we really found is that people weren't just looking for the ability to become exempt from the tax. They were looking for the ability to be able to control their own money, okay? And that's what getting the product allowed them to do, was control their own money. They could choose a product that they could decide how much they wanted to spend. They were able to accumulate cash value in that product. And they were able to take it with them regardless of where they're retired. And so what we found is, out of the 300 and some employees there, we had about 104 that enrolled, and we did about $171,000 worth of premium in that group, which we were able to help a lot of people. And it was a great group from a revenue perspective as well. One other case study, if you go to the next one, this one's a white collar group, large tech company. We did with one of our broker partners out of New York, but the group had a very significant employee population in Washington State. They had about 600 employees in Washington State. And again, same deal, brought in the Allstate product, same level of guaranteed issue, did the live webinars, et cetera. Out of those 600 employees in Washington State, we had about 151 that enrolled at that group and did about $212,000 worth of premium. Interesting side note is that group has 2,000 employees at other divisions and sites throughout the country that weren't subject to the Washington State tax, because the group's not based in Washington State. They're based somewhere else. They just happen to have a site in Washington State. But they're now rolling it out to those other 2,000 employees just because the experience was easy, the education was good for the employees, and they thought it was a worthwhile benefit for the rest of their employees as well. So it's a positive experience all around.
So just to round things out, we did want to provide a little bit of information about Allstate compared to a couple of our key competitors. And I just wanted to touch on a few things that we believe really differentiate us in the marketplace. So I'm just going to really quickly go through this because I know we're tight on time. And I'm going to focus mostly on our whole life plan, just because, once again, I think when we're talking about long-term care, the guarantees associated with the whole life really make this valuable. And also the fact that it matures at age 121, which means that if you do happen to live a very long time and need long-term care in your later years, you know that that's going to be there and you'll still be able to access it if you choose to. So just a couple things to mention. The death benefit for the whole life is guaranteed. That is the key with whole life. Guaranteed, guaranteed, guaranteed. For universal life, that's not the case. And a lot of our competitors they cannot guarantee their products the way that we can. So there's no death benefit reduction. Premiums are guaranteed. Once again, it's available to 121. We do have the ability to offer age-banded rates, which is really important for third-party enrollments. If you are looking at putting something on a tech platform, we do have the ability to do that with our whole life, which a lot of permanent life products really cannot be put on on platforms. And then just to talk very briefly about the long-term care components. We do have a long-term care rider, as mentioned. That is very important. It's not a chronic illness rider, so it does satisfy that long-term care mandate. It's a 4% benefit with extension. And restoration is available at 100%. Some of our competition only restores a portion of that benefit. And coming in at the end of 2022, we will have the ability to offer both extension and restoration together. Two keys that I want to mention is we do have the ability to pay out 100% of that home care benefit if you receive home care coverage together. If you receive coverage at home, you have to have 2 visits by a licensed professional per month, which is a pretty low threshold to set. And we don't prorate that, which is important. And the other piece I want to mention is that we don't require you to be permanently disabled to receive the long-term care benefit. Some of our competition do. Basically, they require you to really make an assumption that you're never going to recover. There are long-term care scenarios where that's not the case, and we can pay the benefit out in that scenario as well. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn this back over to Mike, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll move forward a couple slides, and if you do have any questions, feel free to go ahead and add them into chat now. But I just do want to remind you of some of our upcoming webinars. Number one, May 12th, we have the team from Triada on to talk about their GAP plan. It's one of the only GAP plans that's available in all 50 states, including New York. So those of you who have cases in New York know how hard it is to get a GAP plan in New York. Triada does have an available option there, and they do have a real nice GAP program. So please feel free to join us on that, May 12th at 11 a.m. And then May 26th at 11 a.m., we have the team from Jellyvision on to talk about their Alex program, their Avatar Alex, the artificial intelligence decision support tool, and how to reduce the cost of benefits confusion with Alex. We do a lot of work with Jellyvision and help clients reduce the cost of implementation of Jellyvision because we get the VB carriers to help offset that cost. So join us for to hear the team from Jellyvision on May 26th. Okay. So guys, thanks so much for your time today. Again, just remember, Voluntary Benefit Shop, we're here to help with all of your needs for anything voluntary. What we do every day is we work with brokers like yourselves to bring the best in voluntary benefits to their clients and help to everything from product selection to technology implementation to benefits communication to then servicing after the fact. So you're one-stop shop for voluntary benefits needs. We are here. And like I said, even if you haven't worked with us in the past and you just have a question, feel free to reach out. We'll help you through it. And if we have the opportunity to do business with you in the future, that's great too. You see my contact information here, my email, my phone number, and our website. And again, we appreciate your time. Every 2 weeks, we're here to conduct this and help you learn more as things are constantly changing. So again, I'd like to thank Katie and Eric from Allstate for joining us today. Chelsea, thanks for running the show. And thanks all of you for taking some time out of your day to join us today.